I, like most, am an avid enjoyer of an occasional Marvel movie. When they're good, that is. Thor Ragnarok really brought Thor to my full attention. I never really minded the character either way before. He was always just there. Thor Ragnarok showed me that Thor can, in fact, be extremely fun.
Where are we? You have no idea.
Funny.
Hang on. Give it a second.
Chaotic, funny, and emotional, and fun, and funny. Then Love and Thunder killed my loved ones and thunderstruck all over my prized possessions. To put it simply, I was fairly disappointed. I laughed at the movie after it was over. I said, yeah, sure, it's fine. But then I kept thinking about it. Kept thinking. Even though it was unsatisfactory, it was still living rent-free in my head. And now it's time to collect. It feels like the Thor franchise is cursed. Every other Thor film is bad. The first one was good, more decent. The second one was bad. The third one was good. The fourth one was bad. So that means Thor 5 will likely be at least decent, right? With Marvel's latest track record, I think Ragnarok may have just been a fluke. Or not. Maybe Thor 5 will be good. Thor Love and Thunder was a miscalculated movie due to a couple factors, both in and out of Marvel's control. Whether it was COVID, Marvel's lack of consistency, or Taika Waititi clearly taking a blow to the head between Thor films. With no official confirmation of another Thor movie moving forwards, I, like most, want to know what Marvel will do with their fifth Thor film. Their fifth Thor film. Wow. While I can't tell you what Marvel will do with Thor 5, just because they can make another Thor film doesn't mean they should, unless they have a good reason. Whether the overall story, characters involved, their arcs, their motivations, they need a reason other than money. I mean, money's a pretty good reason, and Disney will jump on that like monkeys on bananas, but I feel like the next Thor movie needs to be carefully considered. Granted, I don't think Thor is a guaranteed moneymaker after Love and Thunder was not loved by critics and sounded less like thunder and more like a wet fart. So I'm not sure if a fifth Thor movie will even make money, whether it's good or bad. People might just not care about Thor anymore. I think I'll also need to look at the previous Thor films, Thor, Dark World, and Ragnarok. This should help give context for what went wrong, what they got right, and how to manage both in an effort to hopefully figure out how to make the perfect Thor film. And no, this won't be an exhaustive recap of the franchise. Well, not entirely. Hey, no, don't click off. Hey, make sure to like and subscribe before you do. Firstly, how did we get here? Let's talk about the director first. Who should direct a Thor 5? Okay, maybe that's too specific. How does the director affect the film? The first Thor film was directed by Kenneth Branagh. Yes, the guy who played Gilderoy Lockhart in the Harry Potter films directed the first Thor film. My 13-year-old self would be so shocked. And he was. He pooped his pants. A more Shakespearean take on the character, Branagh brought a drama that felt otherworldly yet authentically human, all in the same breath. That's to say, most people don't remember the first Thor film fondly, calling it boring, or slow, or boringer, or the one where they talk funny! I recently rewatched this film, and while I understand many of the complaints about it, I think it's aged like fine wine for a Phase 1 Marvel film, especially Thor's first live-action film. Some of the plot elements come off a little hollow on rewatch, which would eventually be echoed 2 more times in this franchise. There's really only one good Thor film now that I really think about it. The fish out of water stuff is great, it feels sweet and simple, but the redemption arc for Thor leaves more to be desired. He sort of shows up and ruins Natalie Portman's life, tries to get his hammer and fails, learns his father is dying and just sort of stops being arrogant. Just in time to take a punch from a twink golem that shoots lava out of its face. I mean, it's a fine movie, but it's a little rushed around the edges. It feels like a filler Marvel film before filler Marvel films were even really a thing. Thor obviously appeared in the Avengers, which was directed by Joss Whedon. Joss knew how to throw all of these characters into a film, how to write them into the plot, and how to manage their contrasting personalities. The Shakespearean nature of Thor was mostly kept. You can especially notice it in the scene where he speaks with Loki on a cliffside.
He did tell you my true parentage, did he not?
We were raised together. We played together. We fought together. Do you remember none of that?
I remember a shadow.
Thor is taken very seriously, but not too seriously. Chris Hemsworth had not shown his worth as an actor yet. This is 2012. His only larger acting credit was playing Kirk's dad at the beginning of Star Trek 09. At this point, nobody knew Chris Hemsworth was really funny, when the writing was also really funny.
The Asgardian shake into the snake that you cannot trust. Really dragging this out.
Thor 2, The Dark World. I haven't rewatched it since it came out, more or less. Actually, I'm going to rewatch Thor: The Dark Side of the World and then read to you the notes I wrote. 13 minutes in, Thor is conflicted between his love for a human and his duty to all of the 9 realms, and his throne, and his father. So far it's fine, but it literally just started, so I would really hope it hasn't already fallen apart. 14 minutes in, romantic dialogue is stilted and is more awkward than intended. Darcy shows up. There is no sauce to the editing or filmmaking, like at all. The scenes just kind of bleed together. And Seabass? 26 minutes. The convergence is sort of dropped into the plot out of nowhere. It's a good way to justify why this film is happening. All of the planets are lining up and the villain has been waiting for that to happen. But it feels like this should have happened in the first 15 minutes of the film, not at around the 25-minute mark. 30 minutes in, the film is starting to introduce the concept of the Infinity Stones, which is cool, but it's just one more thing this film doesn't need to juggle, mostly because it already has trouble juggling the cosmic story and the love story. 36 minutes in, the best part of the film is Loki, and because of how long the film takes to establish its plot, it barely focuses on Natalie Portman seeing Asgard for the first time. Before the action starts and the giant elf goblin explodes the prison and all hell breaks loose, the film doesn't manage its time well, leading to a very uneven pacing. The Dark World doesn't lean enough into the romance between Thor and Natalie Portman, so the small-stakes character elements come off as hollow, while also feeling too large-scale despite being a solo Thor film taking place on Earth. And the reason I haven't mentioned the director for Dark World is because they really don't matter. The production was so messy and so many rewrites and so much re-editing happened. Dark World has no personality either way, so I don't think the director really made an impact on that movie. If this Thor movie never happened, well, it wouldn't have happened, and I wouldn't be talking about it. Other than the setup for the Infinity Stone, removing the Dark World from reality wouldn't be too big of a deal. The Dark World is an early example of Marvel films only existing to set up future Marvel films, or future plot lines for other future Marvel films. It's a nothing burger movie that leads to nothing and has nothing going for it at all. And that problem definitely didn't stop with the Dark World, because next, Thor appeared in Avengers 2, and most of his presence in that movie was A, setting up his own film, and B, setting up the next Avengers film. Again! But at least Thor Ragnarok was a smash hit. Thor Ragnarok starts with a funny voiceover explaining where Thor is, captured. He's trying to figure out why things fell off. Thor's trying to figure out why things feel off, which is what most Marvel fans are doing at this very moment. I'm only kidding. Kind of. Thor sees visions of Ragnarok, the end of everything. So he captures Surtur, who would bring Ragnarok upon Thor and his people, Ragnarok being the end of all things. Thor finds out his father has been replaced by his brother Loki, who Thor thought to be dead. Oh, I forgot to mention, Loki faked his death in the Dark World. Oops. They find Odin on Earth, and he dies. His death releases the main villain Hela, secretly their sister. She immediately defeats Thor and Loki and sends them to a colorful trash planet where they need to escape from in order to save Asgard before Hela destroys it. Oh damn, she's killing everybody. Now for the Dark World, I only wrote my notes for the first 36 minutes, and it took nearly 30 minutes for the plot to actually start moving. Now compare that to Thor Ragnarok. Everything I just explained about Thor Ragnarok was the first 25 minutes. Compare that to my notes on the Dark World, where it took almost 30 minutes for the plot to even start. All of that happened, and the Dark World took 25 minutes for Natalie Portman to get infected by the MacGuffin, while barely setting up or developing any of the character stuff. The convergence hadn't even been mentioned until around the 30-minute mark of the Dark World. That's the main plot point not even being mentioned until 30 minutes into the movie. Ragnarok had a badass opening fight, a funny theatrical recounting of Loki's death followed by Loki being revealed to be alive, disguised as Odin, followed by a funny transition to Earth, meeting Doctor Strange, then finding Odin, who dies. His death releases Hela, who destroys Thor's hammer and sends them to a colorful Jeff Goldblum planet. All in the first 25 minutes! Now, hear me out though. It's not about how fast you burn through your plot or story, but Ragnarok has a much more effective use of time, setting up the basic plot and everything you need to care about in the first 25 minutes, while the Dark World is still setting up its entire plot up until the 40-minute mark. Frigga's death being one of the only motivators in the entire film, and Frigga is barely a character in the first film. That's Thor's mom. Her death in the Dark World barely feels like a motivator, but it clearly is meant to be one. Now, Thor Ragnarok doesn't necessarily take the death of Thor's friends all that seriously, but it still feels like it has dramatic weight. You don't really know the characters very well, but Ragnarok is still a better movie. The rest of the movie is a fun, energetic nightmare on a science fiction rainbow gladiator planet, and it has Hulk in it. There's a lot to love in Thor Ragnarok, and I'm only going over the briefest of plot and story, since I don't want this video to be one of those 2-hour videos, those 2-hour video essays. So I'm going over the basic plot to give you an idea of what works and what doesn't work in a Thor movie. Now I'm gonna quickly compare Ragnarok to the previous 2 films. Thor 1. Thor is arrogant and banished from Asgard. He meets a smart human lady and learns humility. It has a solid structure, but it's nothing special. Thor 2. Bad guys want some space sludge, and that sludge got stuck in Natalie Portman, so the good guys gotta get that shit out of her. Spoiler alert, bad guys don't get the space sludge and Natalie Portman doesn't die. For now. And Thor 3 has Hulk. Taika Waititi's loose improvisational style to his script and storytelling worked for Ragnarok's plot structure. The film still manages to be both focused and easy to follow, as well being loose and goofy.
Hey, let's go get help.
My brother, he's dying! Get help! Help him!
But the same couldn't be said for the sequel. Not only does Ragnarok have a more effective use of time than Dark World, but its story is also more interesting than Thor 1. Thor Ragnarok had the blessing of a more interesting plot and story, alongside a more quirky art style and a director who hadn't yet completely lost his mind. So Ragnarok was bound to turn out better than the previous 2 films. It was set up for success, while Thor 1 and Dark World serve as mistakes to learn from at best, and are forgettable or bland at worst. I used to think Thor the Dark World was as bad as Marvel could get, but recent Marvel movies have proven otherwise. I remember when they announced Thor Ragnarok alongside the rest of Phase 3, and seeing that dark, smoky, ember-filled logo did not make me happy. I was like 15 at the time, and I couldn't have cared less about another Thor film.
Taika Waititi to direct Thor Ragnarok.
Until they announced the director a while later. Taika Waititi. I wasn't super aware of him before he was set to direct the next Thor film, but it immediately gave me an impression. Fun. This film will not be boring. I'm not necessarily saying that a movie can't be slow and boring and still be good, but a Thor movie can't. Slowly they revealed a new logo, production stills, and stills from the film itself. The sets looked colorful. Hulk was going to be in it. Everything seemed to be going right for Thor 3. Everything seemed to be going right for the 3rd Thor film. Even if Thor 1 and 2 were great, Thor Ragnarok was just perfectly set up to be a smash hit. I remember when they announced Hulk would be in the film, I was so excited, as you can hear from my voice. A high caliber team up hadn't been done yet with 2 super powered people. Marvel had set up the perfect plot for a Thor film, which felt like it fit perfectly into the grander Marvel storyline, while also feeling like a nice, singular Thor adventure.
Sorry to hear that Jane dumped you.
She didn't dump me, I dumped her. It's a mutual dumping.
To defeat the villain, he has to destroy his own home. Thor is forced to sacrifice everything he had. He becomes the king of Asgard when there's no Asgard left, only the people, now refugees on a spaceship.
We can rebuild this place.
Marvel had set up all of the perfect elements for a box office juggernaut. Fun, fresh, and full of personality. But the same can't be said for the next most recent one. Thor Love and Thunder had to do something that no other Thor movie had to do before it. It had to live up to an actually stellar Thor movie. It also had to be one of the movies to follow Avengers Endgame, while also being the 4th installment in a solo Marvel franchise. Actually, the first 4th installment in a solo Marvel franchise. And it's easy to say that that is the only achievement this movie managed to get. Because it's while also taking Thor in a new, uncertain direction after Avengers Endgame. While also being directed by the same guy as before, but instead during COVID, and with much more pressure. Looking at it, maybe there was never a possibility of Thor 4, more Thor being good in the first place. The character is invincible. He's basically unstoppable. So you have to work around that by either making him more vulnerable or endangering characters that he cares about. It's sort of the Superman problem. He's invincible, so how do you deal with that on an emotional level and make the audience actually care about the character? So how do you make the audience care about a character who's invincible and can't be killed or hurt in any way? The answer is you take everything away from them and put them through a trial like they did in Thor Ragnarok. Otherwise, a Thor movie will fall flat on its face like Love and Thunder did. Thor the God Butcher is going around and killing all of the gods, and Thor is a god, so that makes him care. But Thor never actually sees a god get killed. Thor should have teamed up with a god who almost got killed by Gore the God Butcher, or was secretly working with Gore the God Butcher. Really, they should have just done anything else with Thor Love and Thunder. Honestly, a large part of the issue of Thor Love and Thunder, I think, were the restrictions during COVID and Marvel's lack of quality control. Marvel seemed like they couldn't be stopped after Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, but then the cracks started to show. And Thor Love and Thunder was a big crap. Oh no! Not Thor, bud! I think Gore the God Butcher being the main villain was their first major mistake. The filmmakers and studio were just clearly not willing to deal with such a serious, large-scale threat again. Taika and team just wanted to make a fun action film. Again. But in doing so, unlike Thor Ragnarok, this time it compromised the entire storyline and tone of the film. A villain called Gore the God Butcher, who doesn't butcher any gods on screen, other than the awkwardly forced opening scene, is already a bad start. Gore is barely in the story. The stakes of gods being butchered en masse is not only a joke, but everything is a joke.
To die a warrior's death.
For a warrior to get into Valhalla, you have to die in the battle.
Which might make sense given it's a sequel to this film, but when they're dealing with a villain who looks like this, and not this, maybe treat him with a bit more consistent presence.
What a neat story!
Rather than just having him scare children for one scene, then suddenly redeem himself to save his already dead daughter. It just doesn't feel earned because we never really spent time with the villain, which is fine when it's Hela, trying to regain the throne she thinks is rightfully hers only to get a skyscraper-sized reality check. Her presence in the film was simple, and there was no redemption arc for her. She's evil, she murders people on screen, then she gets her comeuppance at the end of the film. If I wanted to watch a movie where they waste Christian Bale as a villain by having him intimidate and scare children, I would insert a joke about a problematic actor. But I won't because I'm lazy. At the end of the day, they wanted to make Thor Love and Thunder a goofy movie, and whether it was the villain, the tone, or both, it just didn't work. Kenneth Branagh was allowed to commit to the Shakespearean tone he wanted, mostly because it was before Marvel became extremely controlling over their project, leading to a mismanaged sequel where they butchered Patty Jenkins' script and cut out most of the depth in the film. At least they let Taika Waititi take a bit more control with Thor Ragnarok, but then, I honestly don't know if it was Taika's fault or Marvel's fault, or both. It's hard to tell from any behind the scenes or interviews, but what I can tell is that Taika doesn't take interviews seriously, which I don't blame him. So my point is that Taika made a good Thor movie and then made a Thor movie. I think tonal dissonance is a massive problem for the Thor franchise. Basically, tonal dissonance is when two or more tones clash against each other, taken straight from study.com, when something serious is happening while a character is farting and themselves to death. Something like that. The Thor franchise has gone from one side to the other when it comes to tone, creating an extremely uneven franchise. I think for Thor 5 to be a success, it needs to find a balance somewhere in the middle of the previous Thor films, with a creative team that can manage the requirements and the expectations of the fans who were disappointed with Love and Thunder, me being included in that disappointment. The film wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. There's a few contenders for that list, but I'll leave that for another video. After Love and Thunder, I remembered the jokes I liked, but overall I felt way less excitement after the film than I did for Ragnarok. And over the last couple years, that excitement has lessened more and more, leading me to make this video. The best example I have to compare why Ragnarok works and why Love and Thunder doesn't is to compare the Loki death reenactment in Ragnarok
Lady Sif, get help!
Somebody help!
to the Hela-destroying Thor's hammer reenactment in Love and Thunder.
To planet Asgard.
Both scenes catch the viewer up and re-establish an important plot point or MacGuffin, but both are dramatically different in quality. It's insane, and it's the same guy who did both. The Asgardians are dumbing down the story for the humans in Love and Thunder, whereas in Ragnarok, Asgardians were telling the story to other Asgardians. In Love and Thunder, they have to dumb it down for the humans, which means they're dumbing it down for the audience. Us. They're just making it dumb. There's a way to make dumb funny, but this is not funny. This is just dumb. Gore is butchering gods. Gore is butchering gods, and 90% of the film is concerned with screaming goats and, again, the relationship between Thor and Natalie Portman, which, again, goes nowhere. Dark World and Love and Thunder both have very similar issues. Poor pacing and poor executions of the romantic subplots and the lack of commitment to its own plot or stakes. Dark World took 40 minutes to set up its plot, and Love and Thunder barely has a plot. The more unfocused a Thor film is, the more likely it is to fall apart because beyond all of the quips and lighting and special effects, Thor really isn't all that interesting of a character, at least not in his own films. I will recommend ways on how to fix the character of Thor, as well as developing my own theories on where Thor 5 might go, so stay tuned for that. But I feel like Thor is at his best in Avengers Infinity War.
Dead brother, huh? Yeah, it could be annoying.
No, this time I think it really might be true.
Still got a mom, though?
Killed by a dark elf.
Friend?
Stabbed through the heart. No rage and vengeance, anger, loss, regret, they're all tremendous motivators. They really clear the mind, so I'm good to go.
And that's not even one of his own films.
Bring me Thanos!
Taika Waititi made a great Thor film because they needed that Thor film at that exact moment. But when it came time to make Thor 4 about a man who butchers gods, which Thor is one of those gods, and they made it a colorful, childish nightmare, Marvel lost sight of who would make the best film for the storyline. Because Taika directed the successful Thor comedy, they hired him to direct a fun road trip comedy about hunting down a man who butchers gods. I wish they could have made the plot more engaging, or at least more funny. They could have leaned into the juxtaposition of Thor going on a fun adventure and Gore butchering gods. Taika Waititi could have leaned into the juxtaposition of that more. Or he could have just literally done anything other than what he did with the film. Now, is Ragnarok a perfect film? No, not in general. It's the best Thor film, though. For the type of film it's trying to be, I think it's a flawless execution. I can't really say if a director has a truly positive or negative impact on the Thor films, though. The right creative team can churn out a decent or good film like Thor 1 or Ragnarok, but backfired with Love and Thunder. The writers definitely play a factor in making these films what they are, though. And many Marvel films can have upwards of 6 writers on them. However, I found something interesting about the writers of the Thor franchise that I wanted to share with you. Thor 1 had 3 writers, none of which were the director. Same with Dark World. Even Taika Waititi doesn't have a writing credit on Ragnarok. Obviously, a lot of scenes were improvised by the cast, including Taika, who played Korg in the film, but he did not actually write the film. However, in the case of Love and Thunder, there were only 2 writers, and one of them was Taika Waititi. And it's the worst one! Yet he directed the best one, too? So I don't know what to make of this. This franchise is an inconsistent mess. That's what I can make out of it. Wait, I'll come back to that a little later. In Thor 1, he's a Shakespearean god. In Avengers, he's a Shakespearean god.
Do I look to be in a gaming mood?
In Dark World, he's a sad and boring Shakespearean god, which is suddenly followed up with Thor being a super goofy space pirate in Ragnarok because everybody thought he was boring. Then Marvel showed everybody Thor could be super serious and sad again in Infinity War, but this time, much more interesting. And after failing to kill Thanos properly, he becomes the dude, because depression. Finally pulling himself back together, only to just revert back to being a goofy space pirate. But now he's running around with a little freaky goblin girl who came back to life after her father murdered like half of all gods. Oh, so it's a story about family. I would say that the most consistent thing about the Thor franchise is loss. Every Thor film has an extreme loss, especially at the end of the film, whether it's a permanent one or not. Loki supposedly dies in Thor 1. He's back in Avengers, but then he supposedly dies in Dark World, but he's actually disguised as Odin. Odin dies in Ragnarok, but at the beginning. However, all of Asgard is destroyed at the end of Ragnarok, so that counts. Loki and Heimdall die, but in Infinity War. Natalie Portman dies at the end of Love and Thunder. So loss is definitely a consistent theme to keep an eye on for any future Thor films, despite Valhalla existing, with Natalie Portman, Heimdall, and who knows else chilling in the afterlife. So maybe nobody ever is truly gone.
No one's ever really gone.
Ugh, this franchise is a mess. You're still left with a fairly inconsistent character, though, due to different directors or different writers. Thor has never truly solidified as a consistent character outside of Asgardian man with hammer who fights bad things. So making sure that the tone and plot marry together well, unlike Love and Thunder, while making sure the director has a vision that fits the film, is key for keeping the next Thor film from falling apart. This may seem like a no-brainer for most movies, but Marvel movies aren't most movies. But nailing the character of Thor is going to be the hardest trick for Marvel to pull off. Or should I say Kevin Feige. See, Kevin Feige oversees all Marvel-related productions, so ultimately what happens in the MCU is up to that hat-wearing man right there. Kevin Feige will need to take careful consideration of the balance between plot and story. Establishing a rigid plot structure as soon as possible in Thor 5 will allow the story elements to breathe a bit more, unlike Dark World's romance and villain. Speaking of villain, Hela is the franchise's best villain, and she's not even that overly interesting. I didn't even bother mentioning the Frost Giants in Thor 1. The evil elf in Dark World wants to be evil and just dies. Hela dies, and you know how I feel about Gore the Not God Butcher. So Thor 5 needs a really good villain. And if it's between Zeus and Hercules, it could work. Depending on what the future of the character is in the MCU, if there even is one, is what will truly determine if Thor 5 does well. If there even will be a Thor 5. There's a joke reference in Deadpool and Wolverine, but I'm not sure how serious of a setup that is. I'm sure it won't pay off in Thor 5, which leads me to feel that Thor might work best in other Marvel projects. Similar to how Hulk featured in Ragnarok, maybe it's time for Thor to become a feature character in other Marvel franchises. There just isn't a lot you can do with Thor. For the most part, Iron Man, Captain America, and even Spider-Man all had very clear arcs throughout the MCU. Iron Man goes from profiting off of weapons of war to becoming a hero who uses the ultimate weapon to save all of reality. Captain America is an unbendable super soldier who becomes a little more flexible. Spider-Man goes through the Spider-Man arc. Even Ant-Man goes from a criminal to a hero. But what is Thor's arc? There really hasn't been a consistently unfolding arc from beginning to end, and I feel that's due to the constant swapping of directors and even writers. If everybody at Marvel can learn from the mistakes of the previous films, then they may land another heavy hitter for the Thor franchise. But after the ending of Love and Thunder, what could Thor 5 even be about? Because I was bored, I decided to outline a rough plot summary for a hypothetical Thor 5. I'm not going to be too specific. I wouldn't want Marvel copying my answers. So the movie should start right after Love and Thunder. Thor and that kid are going around saving people being assaulted by various intergalactic ne'er-do-wells. If you don't know what a ne'er-do-well is, Google knows everything, especially the AI Google thing at the top. It's amazing. It's the future. So Thor becomes a solo hero, or with the kid or whatever, who cares? But that makes it easier for Hercules to track Thor. And Hercules will definitely attack the bananas out of Thor. I imagine Hercules to be like a little annoying cousin. I imagine Hercules to be a little twerp. Maybe calling Thor's axe Stormbreaker a big hammer. And the joke being, it's not a hammer, it's an axe. Shut up. I imagine Hercules is a little bit naive and stupid in this version. I feel like that'd be funny, I guess. Hercules would be held on a tight leash by Zeus. I feel like Hercules would probably be forced under the thumb of Zeus and forced to do his bidding, similar to how Thor had to do Odin's bidding. Maybe Thor and Hercules can share that dynamic in common, that both of them had to serve their fathers. Maybe Thor and Hercules can bond over that, and maybe Hercules will have a redemption arc. Oh, Marvel loves its redemption arc! But no, seriously, they could probably do something with that where Thor is trying to help Hercules get over being under Zeus's thumb. Because Thor has dealt with that with Odin, but Thor has already dealt with that. Thor has gotten over that with Odin, so he can help Hercules get over his problem with Zeus. Anyways, Hercules gets beaten up by Thor, which is continued through a montage of Hercules trying over and over again to defeat Thor, failing over and over again. This montage would catch up to the modern day. This would show that Hercules immediately took his revenge after Love and Thunder, while not having this new Thor film take place in the past, for no good reason. The montage of Hercules attempting over and over again to take revenge against Thor would be both hilarious, catching the film up to the modern day, and would show Hercules getting smarter and more tactical with his revenge after each attempt. Thinking like something Hercules goes to Earth and like ravages New Asgard, and then it makes it truly personal for Thor. You gotta just kind of use what you got. There's not a lot. Did that rhyme? I guess I do that all the time. Or maybe Hercules attacks Valhalla. I don't know how that would happen. Maybe Zeus's whole scheme is actually attacking Valhalla or trying to weaken Valhalla. I don't know. I don't know how any of that afterlife bullshit works. I don't know. I'm just making crap up for a video. Sue me. No, don't actually sue me. Don't do that. I said don't. Anyways, all right, no more funny business. No more funny business in the Thor video. That's the joke. Are you the joke police? Sue me. No, no. I feel like Thor 5 could lean into the Greek mythology versus Norse mythology sort of storyline. I imagine if they have Valhalla in the story, they're just gonna destroy it or have like everybody come back to life or something. I don't know. Maybe they'll have Odin be reincarnated and he's younger, played by a different actor. They're gonna do that eventually. And maybe Thor and Hercules, similar to Ragnarok, get sent to a random planet and they have to rely on each other to survive. I know that's similar to Ragnarok, but who cares? It would force Thor and Hercules to work together, and maybe they would get over their crap and they would both go after Zeus. You can't have Hercules be the bad guy without a redemption arc. That one makes too much sense. But this could also be a super predictable version of Thor 5. Leave your opinions in the comments below. I will not read them. I'm not sure how to justify Thor or Hercules being stuck on a planet. It depends on the planet. It depends on the plot. I don't care to figure that out. Having Thor help Hercules, and maybe they both go and stop Zeus and lock him up for god-on-god violence, despite Thor throwing a lightning bolt at Zeus to begin with, starting this whole thing. So, I don't know. Thor Love and Thunder kind of made a whole mess of the franchise. Either way, Thor needs to have a very clear main villain. I feel like Zeus is a better villain than Hercules, unless they pull some random villain out of their ass, or they bring the Dark Elf back. Actually, I feel like they could bring the Dark Elf back and make that work. Why not? It's not like the Thor franchise is going anywhere. Every movie kind of just repeats. It's unfair to compare compare Thor to like Spider-Man or something, because Spider-Man is a much more well-defined character. Thor is kind of just a brash guy with a hammer. So I don't know, what do you do with that?
It's not coming off. What?
They have traveled far.
The franchise is kind of and I have more ideas for Thor 5. If you want me to share them, I can share them in a future video, where I focus more on the future of the Thor franchise. If you want that video, make sure to like and comment down below. These Marvel movies are usually being put together and storyboarded before a director is even hired, with the director basically coming in to oversee the project while Kevin Feige oversees them. This does lead to a too many cooks in the kitchen situation. However, it can sometimes work in the case of Ragnarok. Taika was hired to fix the story they already had developed for Ragnarok. Then Love and Thunder happened. You still need a perfect marriage between film and director, otherwise you either end up with a bland nothing burger like Dark World, or a contradictory nightmare like Love and Thunder. The Thor franchise is just all over the place in terms of quality and tone. It's hard to find a through line to care about from film to film. Thor is barely a franchise, just a bunch of loosely connected adventure films at best, and repetitive, inconsistent trash at worst. Except for Ragnarok. This makes it hard for the casual audience to care about Thor, and especially makes it hard for the diehard fans to care about even more Thor films. Thor will likely always be cursed to be an inconsistent mess of a character that will always be in flux depending on the director, tone, and plot. Yes, Thor is cursed, but curses can be broken.